Alright, what's going on my broskies? My name is Toadskii back again, here to bring you guys yet another One Piece Treasure Cruise video. So today, we are bringing you guys my first official ranking tier list as to where I personally think certain teams are ranked in Pirate Rumble. Now, this is predominantly looking at an attacking standpoint, but these teams can also be used defensively as well. Defense teams are a little bit more of an interesting one because there's lots more strategy involved in defense teams because it's about balancing, you know, trying to bait people into attacking you whilst also making sure your team is good enough, making sure that your characters are actually strong, making sure they have synergy. So this is predominantly looking at like an attacking standpoint and how they really perform, you know, against other defense teams, really. Now, I have not used every single team that you guys are seeing in this video today, so, you know, it is a little bit difficult to do this because Pirate Rumble is a very interesting game mode and we don't know the full ins and outs of it yet, plus the fact that a lot of players don't have the ability to level up every single character that they really want to, so it is kind of hard to test out a lot of these teams. Most of the time, you've probably leveled up like one main team, and that's the team that you're predominantly going to be using in Pirate Rumble. But of course, once we get more scrolls, we'll be able to level up more characters, and in turn, try out more teams, which is going to be better just for everyone, really, rather than everyone using the same 2 or 3 teams, right? So anyways, I have some notes here before we get into it. First of all, the teams listed here are not the only teams you can use in Pirate Rumble, of course. You know, there may be a team that I haven't listed here that you guys maybe see or you use, and just want to say that obviously the teams that you see in this video are not like the end-all be-all teams that you have to use or anything like that. This is also ranked on my personal experience, so facing off against some of these teams and utilizing some of these characters here, that's kind of how I've gone about ranking these as well. I've also talked to a couple of other players as well that were quite high ranking in Pirate Rumble in the first season, so it's awesome to get a little bit of insight from those guys as well. And the way that I've structured, I mean, you can already see the first team there, the Quick and Side team. The way that I've structured it is that like the first 5 spots are like the typical characters that you would see on the team, and then the replacements are just like ones that you would see that can also be put on the team as well. And that goes for all the teams you guys will be seeing in this video. And also, of course, more teams, of course, will be added in the future. So if there's like a new breakthrough in the meta, there's going to be more teams added to this for sure. And obviously, some of the units here will change over time. And this was updated on the 26th of October. So I've had this done for a while now. I just haven't got around to getting things done, right? So, number 7 we have here is the Quick and Side team, as you can see here. Now, the Quick and Side team is good, however, most of the Quick and Side teams that I've gone up against have not been completely leveled up, and obviously on the defense side of things, they are probably going to be using someone like Shirahoshi, for example, to get some health back, which, of course, is going to be really nice for the defense side of things, but offensively, they are still relatively capable. The combination of both V3 Law and Kizaru, like, these two work so well together because they both boost each other with their passives. You got Kizaru, which is able to launch his specials so quickly, and then you've also got Law, who is able to debuff Int, which Int is one of the best teams in the game, and some of the best characters in Pirate Rumble are Int, and you guys will see later on where they're ranked, but the fact that you can use this combination is so good. And then you got this guy right here, this Kuzan V2. He has a pretty good passive. I think he's an HP booster and a defense booster for both Quick and Side, so that's obviously very good. And his special ability debuffs Int as well. So you've got this for debuffing Int, you've got this for debuffing Int as well. I think that his special doesn't do that much damage though, so that's like a really big downfall for the unit. You got Carrot, who is one of the best Pirate Rumble units in the game. Amazing fixed damage in a relatively large range. I don't know if it actually is a large range, but it feels like it's a large range. And a really great passive as well. You got Tesoro, who has one of the best passives in the game, just boosting everyone's CT by level 5 at max, and he does some fixed damage as well. I think he does defense. I can't remember exactly what his special does, but he is a pretty good unit. And then some other characters that you may see on a Quick and Side team are someone like Raid Bellamy or this Pirate Rumble Neko. This Neko is really good, boosting Striker and Cerebral with his passive, and then also being a health cutter. Very, very good. And then you got this Bellamy who has a really low CT, and he's also a health cutter. So if you guys are looking for like a free-to-play unit with a little bit of a lower cost, maybe look at Raid Bellamy because he's actually pretty decent. The Quick and Side team is actually pretty good overall. But personally, I think the teams that, you know, are that you're going to see later on in the video are just a little bit better. Just they're more well-rounded from what I've seen. So the next team that we have here in the number 6 position is the Shooter team. So this team here, the most annoying thing that I found with the Shooter teams is Frankie, of course, because he has a great passive and special. So his passive is an HP boost. I think it might be defense as well, but I'm pretty sure it's just HP boost for your fighter, shooter, slash striker units. But of course, because he is a shooter, works well with shooters, and his special is insane, being a health cutter and defense boost for your shooter characters as well. And then the combination of him and Kuzan. Dude, Kuzan is like the most painful unit to go up against in Rumble. You know, when he launches his special and he can bind essentially your whole team, it is the worst thing ever. And I think it lasts for like 5 or 6 seconds. And within that time, I mean, you are still charging your special, of course, but you can't move. And then when those characters are finally unbinded, you know, they're all set to the back of the queue. So you lose out on a lot of attacking turns there. If Kuzan is able to hit your team for a lot, or if you're using him and you hit the enemy team for a lot in terms of binding them, it's basically GG at that point. You've got also Kizaru, who again just shows up quite often here. He's a really nice unit to have because of the amazing CT lowering, and he's just a really nice unit to just spam out specials. And then you've got also this V2 Lucci, who I see quite often as well. He's a really decent unit actually. He increases your speed of your shooter characters, and when you use his special, it lowers defense of the enemy, and then it does damage. So if the enemy is really tanky, Lucci's a nice unit to bring along there. And Strongwood Ace is a nice unit to run like on the main on your main team. Don't put him on the bench. He's not a really good bench unit, but on your main team he is good because he's a glass cannon type of unit. He cuts his health in half, and then he does a lot of damage to all characters. So yeah, he is nice, especially against teams that don't have a lot of defense or are not very tanky. This Ace is just an absolute, he just decimates them. It's pretty awesome to have. And then on the shooter team as well, other characters that you may see is V3 Akainu, who is really nice because he is a really good bench unit, because when he comes on, and if the timer is less than 30 seconds, all enemies get -3 defense at max passive. And then of course when he launches his special, he lowers defense again, and then does the huge nuke. So when he launches his special, especially when it's 30 seconds or less, it's essentially a one-shot, depending on how tanky your enemy team is, of course. And then this Stampede Usopp is pretty underrated because he has a really good passive of being similar to this Tezora, where he just reduces your CT. I don't know if it's Rainbow or just for shooters, but either way, it's really good. And he has a pretty decent special as well. I think his special is like Special Bind or Action Bind, one of the two. Like, he's a really good unit for the shooter team. And he, of course, because he's a free-to-play unit, his cost is not that high. The only problem is you have to invest scrolls into him if you really want to use him. But again, another really good benefit of that is because he is a free-to-play unit, he doesn't need as many scrolls to max out his abilities compared to, you know, Sugo Fest exclusives, right? And there aren't too many like OP strength units in the meta right now. So if you have additional scrolls, maybe you want to invest in a Kainu just for a little bit, or maybe you want to invest in this Usopp, but the shooter team is a really scary team to come up against. Some people might also ask, you know, where is Legend Capone? And Capone is really good on the defensive side of things, but offensively, Capone is not a really good option to bring. But anyways, that's the shooter team there. Let's move on to the next team here, which is the Free Spirit Critical team. So this team is very interesting in the way that it wants to get the job done. So the way that this works is, if you guys don't know how these characters synergize together, a lot of these characters have passives where it's like either increase the chances of landing a critical hit, or it's like if you land a crit, boost your crew's attack by X value. So that's the way that this team works, is that by doing normal attacks and landing criticals, they just raise their attack by a really large margin. And you know, you can get up to like over 30, level 30 or level 40 attack with just normal attacks and hitting your crits. And then once their attack is at such a high level, when they launch their specials to do like a large range damage, it just does a lot, right? And then on top of that, characters that I've seen typically in a Free Spirit crit team is this Otama. Now she's really good because I believe with her passive, she increases crit rate for your Free Spirit and fighters. And then she has some of the best healing capabilities in Rumble altogether. This bow is really nice. She's got fixed damage. And then you've got the Sabo Koala, Luffy, Zoro, and then Mako and Ace for basically being your main damage dealers. And then other characters that I do see on Free Spirit crit teams is Corazon, because when he enters the field, he gives all of your characters, like, I think at max level, it's like a level 10 attack up. It's pretty crazy. But then once his health falls below a certain threshold, you lose it. And then Bello Betty has another Free Spirit crit rate up passive. And then she's like a supporter type unit. But this team is relatively good. The only problem is that if you're coming up against a team that has absurdly high HP and absurdly high defense, like the Int team, for example, the Free Spirit crit team is not going to fare well against that team at all. And I'll just say, you know, I did use the Int team for farming through all the championship in Season 1, and Free Spirit crit teams were free wins, no matter what. Even if they had characters on their bench that weren't Free Spirit characters that were relatively good units, like it's just GG. Like, they just do not cope against some of the better teams in the game. But overall, I do think Free Spirit crit team is able to defeat a lot of other teams in the game, and I think they're a relatively good team in Pirate Rumble moving forward. It's just a matter of, you know, if you're up against really tanky teams, probably not the team to go for. So moving on up to number 4, and I have the Fighter team. The Fighter team, I didn't fight too many of these style teams in the previous season, but on paper, and from what people have told me, the Fighter team is very good. And the real cool thing about the Fighter team is Jack and Jinbei. So this combination together, both of which have HP boosting passive, so, you know, already from the get-go, your characters are really tanky. And I believe Jinbei also has like a certain amount of defense with his max passive as well. Jinbei, he also, when he uses his special, he reduces enemies' attack by like level 15 or something for like 20 plus seconds. It's absurd. And then you got Jack, which if you launch Jack's special in the first 30 seconds of the fight, the amount of HP cuts you get from it is so good. So if you're able to launch him very quickly, it helps you so much. And then on top of having the tankiness from these guys, you've got healing from Otama, and also increasing your crit rate as well for your fighters. You've got Carrot for amazing fixed damage and her passive. And then you got V3 Katakuri, which is, in my opinion, one of the best Rumble characters in the game, who debuffs Psy characters. Oh no, yeah, he debuffs Psy, I think. Yeah, Psy with his passive, and then his special as well debuffs like Free Spirit, Powerhouse, and Cerebral. Like, holy crap, dude! V3 Katakuri is so good, and he also targets all enemies for like over 2,000 fixed damage. This team together is really good. And then you've also got some other characters that you may see on fighter teams. Kung Fu Luffy, I know a lot of people using. I think he's actually not bad, but he gives paralysis, which is not super amazing. Like, paralysis is actually really good against Free Spirit crit team, because what paralysis does is it stops you from doing your normal attacks, but if you launch a special, it doesn't stop you from launching your special. So the fact is Free Spirit crit teams, they need to be hitting their normal attacks, and if you paralyze them, they can't do that, so that's obviously a pretty big downfall there. V3 Akane is a fighter character, so that actually can work quite well. And then Bullet, who is not super great offensively, but still a pretty decent unit overall, because, I mean, that as well really helps you against Free Spirit crit teams, because they'll all be targeting him instead, so it depends on the situation. But this core 5 is very strong, and you need to be very careful when you encounter it in Pirate Rumble. So moving on to number 3, which is going to be the Striker team. So I think this team is also like extremely good. This Pirate Rumble Neko helps out the Striker team so much. And then you've got the Tezora, which we touched upon earlier down here, increasing your CT timer. Then you got Kuzan as well for just debuffing with the action bind and amazing fixed damage. Whitebeard for health cuts. This unit is amazing, by the way. A really low CT, 30% health cut. I think if you level it up, it's even higher than 30%. This guy as well is pretty underrated, this Trafalgar Law, because he does like over 2,000 fixed damage in a pretty decent range. And he's a striker character as well, so it works really well. So you've got like health cut, fixed damage in a large range. This guy does fixed damage as well. He's a health cutter as well. So you got health cut, lots of fixed damage. You got Carrot as well, who isn't a striker character, but a lot of people that build striker teams utilize Carrot as well, either on the bench or on their main team, because again, Carrot is just amazing with her fixed damage and really, really great passive that can actually buff your striker units as well. So this combination of units together, very, very scary, so be careful when you encounter that in Pirate Rumble. So in my opinion, this is the 3rd best team in Pirate Rumble. Toadskii for in the future here, and I just thought I would like to add for the Striker team specifically, there is something that I did miss. I do feel like a character that I see quite often used in the Striker team is Shanks' Crew. Shanks' Crew is a very powerful unit that is a nice defensive style unit, but also applying health cuts is a nice addition to the teams. And even though Shanks' Crew is not a striker unit himself, he is still a nice addition for the teams to allow additional tankiness and health cuts for those Striker teams to then allow your fixed damage dealers to wave clear the enemies. So now I'm going to move on to number 2, which is going to be the Slasher team. I think the Slasher team is the 2nd best team in Pirate Rumble right now. Now, the really cool thing about the Slasher team, now obviously this was like the core that we were mainly using in the first, couple of rounds. However, when we got V3 Law getting his buffs, or getting his actual abilities in Pirate Rumble, it made him a really viable unit to run on your main Slasher team. And a lot of people were using him instead of Inuarashi, which meant that the Slasher team had a little bit more viability against the Int team, which as you could probably see right now, is going to be the #1 team. So having V3 lore accessible right now will just make slasher teams so much better, and we did touch up on earlier, but the fact that this lore and this Kizaru both boost each other with their passives, so that obviously makes a big difference, because lore's passive only boosts Psi units, so that's obviously a big downfall because he and Kizaru are the only Psi units on the team, but still really good because he also debuffs int characters, which is great. Other characters you may see is Legend Cracker, because he's very similar to this Tesoro, where he reduces your CT timer, so you can launch your specials a lot faster. This is a relatively scary unit to come up across, so be careful with that. I know he was used on like a Powerhouse team. Powerhouse team might be here somewhere. I'm not really too sure where I'd place it, but like the Powerhouse team I did see a little bit. You know, him with Hody Jones and Snake Man, V1 Big Mom, stuff like that. Raid Mihawk is also a pretty decent unit to run on the slasher team as well, because he has a relatively low CT, and he's a health cutter as well. So health cuts are very useful to have, especially against the int team being extremely tanky. Just having health cuts to reduce the HP rather than try and out damage them is definitely the way to go. But there's lots of other slashers you could use as well. Like, I mean, Luffy Zor is a slasher unit and is pretty decent on a slasher team. Another unit is like Raid Rayleigh, who is very similar to like Legend Pudding, where it reduces your, I think it's your slasher or your cerebral or rainbow. I can't remember. I don't remember exactly, but like Raid Rayleigh, he like reduces your CT timer. So again, you can launch your specials a lot faster. So that's the way that that's kind of structured. But this main core of units is typically what you see in a slasher team, and the amount of synergy that you get is great. I mean, this Doflamingo is the best Rumble unit in the game, I think, bar none. He is the best because of his amazing passive and his special, which can help you out a lot, and it just does a lot of damage. He just does a lot of different things. And his int, driven, and slasher, all three of which are amazing in Rumble just because of this unit being as good as what he is. So that's the #2 team that I have on the Rumble list right now. So now we're getting to the #1 team, which, to no surprise, is going to be the int team, and I have in brackets the driven team because a majority of the really good int units are driven, and, well, Dofi being that unit, because the really cool thing is that, you know, him, this NL, this Katakuri, Blackbeard, those four in particular all being driven and int work so well together. So of course we already just touched on what Dofi does. This Rare Recruit NL is just absurd. I don't know why they made his passive as good as what it is. It's like HP up, defense up, guard rate up, and his special is not terrible either. And he's a Rare Recruit, so he's easier to max out with the Rumble Scrolls to get him to max. So this unit, absurd. V3 Katakuri, which we also touched up on earlier, debuffs Psych characters with his passive, debuffs Free Spirit, Powerhouse, and Cerebral units when you launch his special, targets every enemy, massive fixed damage, just again absurdly powerful. Rumble Jozu, he's actually been pretty good. He's another int boosting unit, and he does another really decent amount of fixed damage as well, so he's nice to have on the team. And Blackbeard, who is another really good damage dealer. His passive is really good as well, helping out your team, and you know, when he falls below a certain HP threshold, he gives himself, I think it's additional attack or CT timer, something like that, and then when you launch his special, he does like a really good amount of damage and gives himself attack up and CT timer, so you're able to try and launch his special a lot faster throughout the fight. This main 5 is what I personally use, and I think is the best current 5 int driven / team you can run right now. But on the bench, you can run a lot of different things. Personally, I run Legend Carrot on the bench just because if any of my characters go down, I want to try and, you know, bring in a unit that can deal a lot of damage, and Carrot is able to do that. But there's lots of other good units that you could run that int or driven, right? You've got like this Fujitora version 1, 6+, mass amount of health cut. You don't even have to level up his special at all. Like, it's already like a 50% health cut at level 1, and his passive as well. I think when you max it out, it's like a level 7 or a level 8 HP up for your driven characters, which is so good. You've got Pudding, who is very good for reducing your CT timer for your int units, so she's a nice supporter style unit. And then Shanks is another supporter style unit that you could use as well. I know like Legend Buggy was something that was being thrown around a lot, who's another supporter style unit that can buff the stats of your int team or your driven units or whatever. So, you know, there's lots of good options here, but I feel like this core 5 units is like the best core 5 team you can run right now on Rumble. The only real problem is that like if you're using this team, for example, and you're up against health cutters, that can be a little bit of a problem, because if they cut your health, it severely nerfs this team, especially when this NL gets knocked out. You lose his passive, which loses out on HP and defense, which is a big problem. And I have noticed that myself. Once he goes down, the team just crumbles. So you need to make sure that you have a good replacement for when this guy goes down. If Josu goes down, it's not a big problem. When Dofi goes down, it's a big problem. But because Dofi is just innately so tanky, he typically doesn't go down very easily. Most times, if I do lose, he is the last unit on the team, which is pretty cool because he's just so good. NL or Josu are typically the first two characters to die when I use this team. But overall, I do think the Int team right now is the best team that you can run. And I would say if you have this core 5 of units, you should probably use it because it's actually really, really good, and you should level them all up because they're amazing. But I do think Slasher is no slouch either. I do definitely think Slasher and Driven are the two best teams right now, and then Striker and Fighter are like that tier right below it, and then everything else is kind of just below that. But as I said, like the Powerhouse team is another team that you probably could list on here as well. But at the moment, these are the ones that I have here right now. And as I said, if your team that you see or your team that you use is not on this list, don't fret. I'll likely add it in the future. So as I said, you know, this is just the very first of these Pirate Rumble tier lists that I've made, so hopefully it goes down okay, and I would say most people would agree with this. And you know, there may be more units you could add to this that I didn't really touch up on in this video today, but I wanted to make sure that I got the main point across of the main teams that I have personally seen, and also the main units that are within those teams that I have seen that get the job done. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video today, and if you guys did enjoy it, make sure you go ahead and leave a like. And if you want to stay up to date with all the content that I post, including more One Piece Treasure Cruise content, make sure to hit the subscribe button down below. But other than that, guys, I'll see you guys within the next video.